we definitely talked about like impressions of the three movies. So
Yeah,
let's delve a little into characters themselves and maybe how they
yeah,
changed for the better or worse or not at all over the course of the three movies. We won't touch on all of them like in depth, but let's definitely hit the main ones. Let's start with Kirk, I think.
mm, yeah. Well, well, Kirk, I already kind of said what I think when we talked about the first movie. Kirk doesn't, up until in the first two movies, he doesn't really feel like Kirk. He feels like a different character, completely different character. He's this young delinquent is this devil may care attitude. He has this he joins Starfleet on a dare, and he doesn't care about the rules, and he sleeps around and is just he's he doesn't feel like Kirk, and he's destined to be the captain of the Enterprise, and he has daddy issues afterwards too, and he's looking for a father figure, and yeah, that's Kirk. That's me, Kirk.
Yeah, that is Kirk in a nutshell. I think I've always said when we talked about Abramsverse that Kirk is wilder, more reckless, more impulsive. Like he is like you said kind of a stranger from what we expected to see. Now, the great thing about fandom is the playground, right? Because they love to
Yeah,
pick that apart and say, why is he like that? Um, what is it that causes him to have such a personality shift?
I mean, I can understand why. I mean, I can understand like if he's father than young and stuff, but it's such a cliche,
It
It's
is a cliche.
such an
It,
boring and annoying cliche that was just completely unnecessary. It really was completely necessary to me. We do get like in the last movie, he becomes like more like the actual Kirk we know from the series. He
yeah.
becomes this serious guy, kind of a little sarcastic, kind of but mostly a good, good captain. And he does, Chris Pine in the last movie. Chris Pine, like someone, it seems like someone just gave him the entire original series to watch, so he makes such a good Shatner impression. Basically, he really gets the mannerisms down,
I, I
and
will tell you something that I have read over the years from his interviews over these movies. He was not given as much leeway in the first two movies with the character um, because he really took a lot of his like acting directive from Abrams.
mm-hmm,
And like
definitely,
this is the
yeah,
character, like we're gonna have this, you're gonna see a young version of him like drive a car off a cliff, and this is who you are. Like you are unrestrained and you've got a huge chip on your shoulder. And so
yeah,
I find that he has the most character progression of all of them because, and for me it really comes down to like what he was allowed to do with the character at the director's discretion, and how well it fit into the script. So if you take a step back from like the Kirk character as we know him,
mm-hmm,
and you think about just the Star Trek the first two movies as like action movies, and the kind of character he's playing, it fits right in with the script and what he's supposed to portray. Like, so in a way, I don't really blame Pine for that because I think like you got your orders and you did your job. And is it
yeah,
really your fault you couldn't? You had to present what was written on the page, not what you like what may have been the character. And at the same time, I think they were also telling him, if I recall, to make it not Shatner Kirk.
yeah.
So it had to be Pine Kirk.
I've seen this argument that so Kirk started out as a delinquent, but then he matures like in the show. But
Uh-huh.
in the show, we are very explicitly told that Kirk had the opposite trajectory. He
Yes.
used to be a nerd. He used to be a nerd, and then he got better. But that you can look at it like he was delinquent, and then to check. character progression, he became more mature. But it's such a cliche. Like I said, it's cliche. It's annoying. It's unnecessary. You had a character. You had a well-written, well-established character. Just use
you
it.
had the main character of a franchise.
Yeah.
One of the reasons people love the original series is Kirk. Just like it is
exactly.
Spock, right? So like why would you change it so fundamentally like at the outset?
It's really annoying.
It is very interesting that they chose to go that way, but I'm very glad they kind of reeled it in for Beyond and gave us a more mature Kirk, because he's still Abramsverse Kirk. Like there's a clear distinction between Roddenberry Kirk and what we call the Abramsverse Kirk. It's he's still cocky, right, in a sense, and he's just more tempered by experience and by maturity, really. So and it really would have behooved them not to put him in the captain's chair in the first movie. Really. And in fact, it was almost cruel to say that he was going to have to take a step back and become a first officer to a more experienced captain so he could learn, and then to take that away immediately. Because, to be honest, considering demoting him and then forcing him to basically mentor under someone officially, was the right call. It was the right thing to do. So to undo all of that was unnecessary. But what can you say? He's the star of the movies. Like, they just had to keep him in the captain's seat. So, and I agree with you. Like, it seems to be the only reason people think he should be in the captain's seat is because he is the poster boy for Starfleet, because he's, quote, a hero. It's kind of annoying. So that's why I really like the fandom who addresses that in like stories and stuff, by just not only making him a little more like Shatner Kirk, but basically just showing his better qualities and how he essentially could earn his seat. He has the potential to earn his seat. You're just not going to see it on the screen in 2 hours. So, one of the moments I liked in Into Darkness was when Kirk finally has that humility that Pike was talking about, when Marcus is basically like, I'm going to destroy your ship, like, no matter what you say, and Kirk has that moment of humility where he's like, I'll do anything you ask as long as you don't kill my crew. So the Kirk before that was too arrogant to have made that statement.
It's kind of true, but at the same time, it feels like, like you said, the entire movie was kind of plagiarizing Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
It feels like a bit for Wrath of Khan, where Kirk has to contend with not being able to win,
Yeah, it's a shame that in order to develop these characters like to recognizable forms, you have to put them through so much trauma.
Yeah.
So that being said, let's talk about Spock and his trauma.
Spock. You started talking about him, so I'll let you start off.
I knew Zachary Quinto before Star Trek. I used to watch him in the show Heroes, where he played sort of a serial killer. So he played like a bad guy, okay, who had powers and did not mind hurting people for his own means. So I liked him as the villain in that show. Okay. I did not think he would have the range to play Spock in Star Trek. Once I knew what, like if you had shown me Nimoy's Spock, and then you had like, oh, well, we're gonna have Zachary Quinto play him, I would have been like, no, I didn't think the actor had the range to do that. I didn't realize that, of course, until I actually got familiar with the original series Spock. So, but my first impression of him in Star Trek 2009 was still very, like, he's a very stilted type of character. And, people say, oh, well, he's Vulcan. And I'm like, no, because you can't really compare him to Prime Spock at that point, because Prime Spock is so He's so relaxed.
Yeah, calm down.
But if you go back to the original series Spock, then it really stood out to me what it was that was off to me about the Spock character. And it is to me it's Quinto's delivery. So,
Yeah,
okay, so that's really enough about just how I feel about the actor playing Spock. To me, it doesn't get better or worse. It's just kind of the same over the course of the movies. But Spock's characterization, like, was kind of like nails on a chalkboard for me in Into Darkness. So in 2009, I was just like, okay, I feel bad for you. You just lost your whole planet and your mom, like right in front of your eyes. And oh look, you've got a girlfriend you like to kiss in public. That doesn't seem like very. That seems kind of at odds with like your whole species, just the way they like to act in public. But anyway, I feel like his role in 2009 was very, he was the guy who was against Kirk. And that is like a generic type of cliche. That's a cliche role too, if you ask me.
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So from that respect, I was like, okay, you did your job. Like you kicked him off the planet, and he came back like a bad habit. And then you decide to work with him because you both want to you don't want people to die, so you're going to work together and get over it. You didn't get the feeling they were liked each other at all at the end of the first movie. So going into Darkness, it's really not that better. It seems better from Kirk's perspective, but from Spock, you're like Spock and Into Darkness. He felt so all over the place, and that's a weird thing to say about a Vulcan.
Yeah.
That's a weird thing to say about a Vulcan. Even his girlfriend makes a point of you are not acting like you should. So I was how embarrassed, secondhand embarrassment. How much of that did you have when he yelled Khan? Because even today, that scene, I just skip over it because it's so awkward for me to watch Quinto have to scream Khan like that.
I'll tell you the truth. At this point, I was like, when is this going to be over?
Yeah, so I didn't really buy into the whole Kirk that Spock doesn't understand their friends until the end of the movie when Kirk is dying, and then he's angry that Kirk is dead and wants to go punch somebody in the face. I felt like he was so emotionally volatile. The whole movie, I couldn't. It's like I couldn't pin him at one place and be like, "What is your problem?" So when we got to Beyond, at that point, I was like, anything's better than Into Darkness, especially with Spock's character. They toned it down. He's really sort of I'll say now he's more like a quiet depressed person instead of a angry depressed person. I don't know what the difference is. But I at least appreciated we got to watch him think through some things and whatnot. But at the same time, he's been through so much trauma. I try to give him a pass, but I never really felt one way or the other. I was like him though. I was upset. I was like, so Ambassador Spock is dead. Well, there goes your role model.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if any of this that I just spouted makes any sense, Soda, but my feelings on Spock is ambivalent at the best because he wasn't horrible, but he wasn't good. It just was kind of stayed that way over the course of the three movies.
Yeah. I have to say, yeah, I think Spock is also, as I said, the two characters that were completely, I didn't really like in the two first movies were Kirk and Spock, and I think the problem is that I didn't like Spock in Beyond either, because the thing that the original series did well was first establish Spock as this is a Vulcan, as
Mm-hmm.
a representative of the Vulcans. He's logical. He suppresses his emotions, and then when he has those moments when he displays his emotions, you understand that it's rare and it's significant.
And not necessarily of his choice.
Exactly. So the movies didn't do that at all. The first time we see Spock, he's a kid and he loses control of his emotions. Every scene basically with Spock involves him being emotional in some way that doesn't fit him. It shouldn't fit him, but the movies never bother to establish Spock as a Vulcan. Basically, we always see him as emotional. So, in the second movie, when, as you said, in the first movie, it doesn't become clear at all that he and Kirk and even McCoy become any sort of friends. It isn't even clear in the second movie. His relationship with Uhura is actually more developed than his relationship with Kirk or McCoy.
Yes.
And then, yeah, I actually kind of like the relationship with Uhura in the second movie, actually. One of the only things I liked about the second movie. In the first movie, it was kind of like a non-issue, basically. It was just there.
Yes.
But in the last movie, in the second movie, yeah, it was contrived and it was obviously trying to rip off the Wrath of Khan, and you can't have that if Spock and Kirk aren't good friends. So they kind of fast-track the friendship and hope to think that something happens in between the movies. I don't know. But in the last movie, I felt like in Beyond 2, I felt like they were trying to push that agenda that they are actually very, very close friends. Spock kept calling Kirk Jim the entire movie and felt completely unearned since when are they on first name basis, And yeah, it just Spock wasn't really well handled. In the last movie, it wasn't well handled either. It just wasn't really well written or well acted, and that's very sad because he is the most popular character in the franchise, basically, and they completely botched him.
Even like in the first movie, said this Spock is going to be more emotional. Here's all the reasons why. He's got a girlfriend who's human. His mother's gonna die. His race is gonna die. He's gonna lose his captain. Like,
Yeah.
he's going to have a counterpart who seems so much better than him. And has had this great destiny and this like really fulfilling, has basically lived a life that is worth something. Like, it's gonna make him, to be honest, like the work that he's doing looks really second best compared to Ambassador Spock. And I think he feels that way. It seems to me like in Beyond, they basically try to go, well, Spock is at a point where he thinks he's not anywhere near his potential, and it's basically because he's comparing himself to another version of himself.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of baggage, and they try to do that by making him express it, like in very like intense ways or just awkward ways. So I blame the writing for all of that. And then the fact that Quinto was like tasked with this really iconic character with bad writing, but like having him reintroduced but with like bad writing, he was set out to not do well from the beginning. And but the thing is, part of it is like, you saw how Pine was with Kirk and Beyond versus how he was in like the first movie. If you look at Spock from the first movie to Spock in Beyond, like, what is the difference? What is the difference?
Yeah.
There is no difference. So it's also that it's like at a point you feel like Quinto didn't really want to contribute to making Spock a more well-liked character. It's like, I don't know. It's sad. It's sad.
Actually, there is, the new Spock they cast in Discovery. I think Jonathan Pack. I remember his name is Pack. I don't remember the first name. He is actually, I think he's done a better job than Quinto. I'm very sorry to say. He's done a much better job than Quinto. I actually can buy him as Spock. I don't know, he just does it better. He gets it better.
I just don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I hate the Spock character because I don't feel that strongly about him.
Yeah, I don't hate it either. I mean, I look at the cliches in Kirk character.
Yeah.
Spock isn't a cliche, he's just very poorly written.
So really quick before we move on to like Uhura, can we talk about Kirk as a womanizer or portrayed as a womanizer in the Kelvin Verse movies? Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I mean, in the first two movies, like you said, they were unable to introduce a female character without giving her an underwear shot, and most of them were because Kirk was around, looking at her in her underwear. Um, yeah, he's kind of he sticks around a lot. And no, I just think it's part of the general pop culture like image of Kirk rather than who he actually was.
It is, and it's a shame because if you know anything about original series Kirk, he's okay, he might seem flirty, but he's really just charming. Kirk in like even from the first movie, that what he was, doing to flirt with females was not charming. In fact, it's no wonder Uhura wanted to hit him and like smack him for even talking to her because she's just like, why would I give you the time of day?
Yeah.
Like,
He's not charming. He's annoying and
he's annoying. And then
he's disrespectful.
Right. And after a certain point, it basically is like, is he just interested in like having flings with people? I mean, in Into Darkness, he answers a call after getting out of bed with two like, females with cattails, like two Cations or whatever.
Yeah. I don't think they're occasions.
I know. It's like, why do we always see him on his like off, like, not being the captain as like in someone's, basically in someone's bed or trying to flirt with someone? Like, is that all he is outside of being Captain Kirk? And it's a shame because why would you take that one element from pop culture and then like play it up? Why is that the trait to play up? It's kind of ugh. It's not. It doesn't lead. It does not leave the viewer with a good feeling, and especially in this day and age where we are far more sensitive to the treatment of others.
Yeah, he's very disrespectful. Like the way we see Uhura in her underwear, it's basically because he's hiding under the bed of her roommate.
Yeah,
watching her. And just original Kirk would never do that.
Right.
Like, yeah. And also, as I said, it's the action movie cliche. In the action movie cliche package, the main character has to be super manly. As a super manly man, he has to sleep around with women and disrespect them.
I mean, like the throwaway line about Chapel. Like, oh yeah, after she got over, like after she finished, you finished with her, she had to become a nurse on an outpost. What?
Yeah, and he didn't even remember who she is.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's table that because there's nothing good gonna come from just. Ooh, it gets.
I mean,
yeah, it just makes me cringe.
We just agreed it's bad. Yeah.
It was really bad. It's one of those things I completely chalk up to just bad writing. Bad writing. I don't even think Pine as an actor was probably comfortable doing that. So, because I've seen a lot of his other work and interviews and stuff. So let's move on to Uhura. Because Uhura is technically sort of like the third lead of the franchise.
I would say Scotty is the definition more, but yeah.
She is because, especially if you see the promotional materials, it's Spock and Kirk and Uhura.
It makes sense because these days it's far more, especially since they only had one main female character, so they really push her. She is. I think I think if there is one character that got better, but more screen time, better characterization than the original series, it's probably Uhura because original series Uhura barely got anything, and at least Uhura gets something to do in every movie, kind of.
She does. And what she gets to do is not necessarily tied to her relationship with Spock. Because my fear going into the movies, or at least into the second movie, was that they're going to play up the relationship with Spock and then like take away from her as a individual. And that's the one thing you wouldn't want to happen because she is supposed to be like a badass female. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, from the first scene in Star Trek in 2009, she stands up to Kirk in the bar, right? She's got comebacks for him, like, when he, sees her in her underwear, she's not taking
Yeah.
any crap from him. So
Yeah.
I was always afraid that they would sacrifice some of that personality and some of that toughness, um, just to have her like in the context was as Spock's girlfriend. But it actually didn't turn out that way, so it was probably a good thing.
I think even in I think Into Darkness, kind of her story does kind of mostly revolve around their relationship with Spock, but I actually think it was well handled
Yeah.
because it was a good conflict. It was a conflict that made sense, and the way they handled it also made sense.
Yeah.
So I actually kind of did like it. And then with the last movie, she also got a lot to do on her own, with not entirely on her own, but she kind of led Sulu when they're paired off. And yeah, she just I think she was actually well handled comparatively. I mean, she didn't have a big role, even if they pushed her in the promotion material.
Yeah.
She didn't have a really big role in the movie.
Yeah.
But the role she got was, I think she was well handled for the most part.
Like I said, it's really nice that she gets to be like the badass female, but at the same time, it's also really nice that she gets to be the girlfriend, because those are it shows that she's well rounded. You know what I mean? Like, she's tough when she needs to be the officer, and she's sympathetic and caring when she needs to be the girlfriend. Like, that's what you want from your characters, right? They're dynamic. So you're right. Her treatment in the Kelvin universe is better than the original series. At least she's not like holding on to Kirk saying, "I'm scared, Captain."
Yeah.
Ooh.
I mean, one thing kind of annoying is the uniforms. Apart from
Yeah.
the underwear short, the uniforms were also kind of annoying. Like, yeah, okay, if you wanna keep the miniskirts from the original series, fine. You know what? Fine. But why also make them short sleeve? It makes no sense. The ranking is at the bottom of the sleeve. How can we know the ranking now? Yeah. So that was also kind of annoying.
Yeah, and I think her best scene in all three movies was definitely with the Klingons. Like,
Yeah.
that was really good. That was one of the other things I liked about Into Darkness. Her scene where she gets to do like
Yeah.
Good job. How about Scotty? Let's talk about Scotty.
Yeah. I think Scotty is the actual third lead in the movies.
He should be.
He's very he's fun. He is a lot of fun. I think like you said, J.J. Abrams kind of really constrained Pine. I don't think anyone could constrain Simon Pegg.
That's exactly right.
They just told him run around, do whatever you want, and that's what he did. You could see he was actually having fun on screen, just running around, talking in a very obvious Scottish accent, and having the time of his life. He's a fun character. He gets a lot to do in all of the movies. In the first one, he's instrumental in all of the plots basically, and yeah, he's just a very fun character.
It's a very good acknowledgement of how essential Engineer Scott was to getting the Enterprise out of sticky situations.
Yeah.
That's a very good way to acknowledge it, is by having him like be crucial to the plot. So the thing is, he gets a sidekick, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, he does. And then in Beyond, he gets another sidekick.
Yeah. Yeah.
or he becomes a sidekick.
So so Scotty, I think, like you said, Simon Pegg really enjoyed the role. He did complain, I think, some of what he had to do in Into Darkness. I don't know. I think he felt like also that like some of his cast, like his co-actors got shafted.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that leads us to talking about McCoy.
Yeah. He should have been the third lead, but he wasn't, because he barely got anything to do, especially in the second movie. Yeah. But also, I think in the first movie, after like the first part in the academy, he didn't really do much.
Nope.
It was mostly kind of comedic relief. And ironically enough, he became the breakaway character. I think he's the character that like got the most love out of the fandom
He did.
of the new movies. He became like super popular. Yeah, Carl Urban. I mean, Carl Urban really did channel the Forest Kelly. He really just got the mannerisms down perfectly from the first movie on. He was really good at it.
Oh, he went out of his way to pay homage to DeForest Kelley. He wore the pinky
Yeah,
ring in Beyond. He wore the necklace that Disco McCoy wore.
yeah,
Like he did go out of his way to do his best to make that Leonard McCoy. The problem was, like you
yeah,
said, he got barely any screen time, except for the first Academy part in 2009, and then he got a screen time with Spock, of course, in
yeah,
Beyond, which was good because you could see he actually had some wisdom to part. Like
yeah,
he was he was definitely a doctor, not just in the sense that he was like trying to fix people, but like listening to them talk about the things that were bothering him was really nice touch. So,
yeah.
sadly, like when he got his arm trapped in the torpedo and into darkness, I'm like, is this all he's good for? Like to almost die and to make everybody upset? Like, is that it? I guess so.
I guess so.
I love that he had to fly the drone ship and beyond.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's fun. That's fun.
Because it's like it's perfect when you take the character is like this is not his forte and then put him in that
He
situation.
has to be there. He has to be
And yet basically you got to see his training as a Starfleet officer because he can shoot a phaser, he can like fly an alien ship and probably land it,
there.
I
Yeah,
hope. At least well enough they
yeah,
don't die. You get to see him like outside of just with like a tricorder in his hand or standing on the
yeah,
bridge like saying a really like really southern colloquialism, like things that even me as a southerner would never say. Let me just preface that. I'm like, okay, who went and looked that up online? Is that the corn-fed mind? Like, is that what you came up with? Carl Urban himself, he really did try his best. I've read several interviews with him. He was very upset after, for Into Darkness.
yeah.
He just basically said they just gave him no scenes, no material. It's like he really wasn't there.
Yeah.
So he was almost to the point where he was going to refuse to do Beyond.
I think watching this, I think this is the best proof that J.J. Abrams and whoever wrote the script, their main inspiration came from the original series movie
Yes.
mostly, and not the show because yeah, McCoy also didn't have a lot to do with the movie.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's really annoying.
Okay. Let's talk about Chekhov.
Chekhov. Chekhov was cute. I think he didn't have that much to do, but he was cute.
Adorable is the
Um,
word.
yeah. I think you can even talk about Chekhov and Sue in the same breath because they were both like cute. They were good. They were fun. They didn't have a lot to do.
Yeah. Except the two times like Sulu got to sit in the chair. Into
Yeah.
Darkness and in
Also,
Beyond.
and in '09, I guess Sulu also got to have his like fancy fight, but
Yeah. And Kirk asked him when they're getting ready to like jump down to the drill, like, what's your skill? And he's like, fencing.
yeah.
Yeah. So John Cho, I really do like that they cast him as Sulu because he kind of delivered like I think I've said this before, kind of like a no nonsense Sulu. Like he's definitely got the adventurous side to him. I mean, why else would he be like, yeah, send me down to the drill, let me fight some people? But at the same time, you can see like he looks pretty good in a captain's chair. He might not be experienced
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
for it, but maybe one day. So I don't know. Because you know how like Sulu in the original series was like always like making cracks and stuff. Sulu
Yeah.
in Abramsverse, he did that sometimes, but he kind of did it in a dry way.
I find it interesting that, like, in the original series, Chekhov's main relationship were with Sulu being like those two snarky dudes, and with Spock was kind of sort of his mentor, but in the movies, his main relationship seems to be, well, in Into Darkness, apparently it was with Scotty
Yes.
because he's kind of an engineer, and then in Beyond, he spends most of his time with Kirk.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
And I really
Yeah.
kind of take that away as like, you know, because Chekhov is so young, like he's what, 17? When they, for how in the world did he get put on the
Yeah.
helm at 17 in a crisis situation?
Exactly. He's underage.
So, but because he is
Yeah.
essentially like, technically he's not that much younger than Kirk. I mean, that, which is sad, but because he is younger, I kind of got the feeling like he was good at a lot of things and just kind of learning from different people,
Yeah.
like where does he really fit? Because he likes obviously learning under Scott, like in the engineering, but he looked like he's gonna cry when Kirk told him to put on the red shirt and, you know, go down there and be the chief engineer, um, the acting chief engineer. And then he looked like he was really looking up to Kirk and Beyond when he just kind of was like following his lead.
Yeah.
and you know, just learning command, I think, is what he was doing in that situation. So, but other than that,
Yeah.
like Pavel,
Okay.
and then Pavel was the only one, you know, they tried to keep like the original series where, you know, he's kind of got the thing with the women. He likes to flirt with the women in the
Yeah.
original series. So we do see him flirting a few times and Beyond for sure. Or, you know, getting thrown out of someone's quarters
That's
without his shirt. It's interesting because when you compare Chekhov and Sulu, like Chekhov was adorable and seemed like, you know, like the baby face, and he was very nice. But at the same time, he kind of got like he got the flirtiness and stuff from his original series counterpart. Sulu to me feels like he got like the least from his original series counterpart. But what they did like give him as a character, he was good with. Like it fit for some reason.
yeah, true. Also, there's also the point of making, giving Sulu a husband
Yeah.
and a daughter.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
he does have a daughter. I think it was confirmed in Voyager that he does have a daughter.
Yeah.
But,
It's confirmed in the novels for sure.
Yeah.
Her name is Demora. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but here he has a husband, not a wife.
Yep.
So I remember there was kind of an issue because George Takei, who played Sulu in the original series, himself said that he doesn't actually like it that they made Sulu gay because, he didn't play him as gay. Just because he is an actor who is gay doesn't mean every character he plays is gay. But at the same time, there is no LGBT representation in the original series otherwise. So
Yeah. I don't think they picked Sulu just because of George for that role. I think Peg and Jung wanted to introduce some representation, and that's just how they worked it in. And John Cho was fine with that. You know what I mean? And more to the fact, like Ben Sulu, his husband, is actually one of the writers. That's Doug Jung.
yeah.
Oh, also fun fact. I don't know if you know this, but when you first see Yorktown and Beyond, and you're seeing like all the people, the buildings. First off, all that was shot in like Dubai because it had like more modern structures to fit the scene.
Yeah.
There's this one kid, like the Orion kid, in one like screen or one shot. That is actually Justin Lin's son, the director's son, because Justin Lin like let his son have a cameo in some of his other movies. So that's the little Orion kid is his kid, his actual kid.
I think the last character, two last characters we should talk about. First of all, Pike, which became very popular in the fandom.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know. I think, like I said, the entire point about Kirk and his daddy issues was so cliche to me, and Pike came in as this father figure and gave him a chance. But he gave him more than a chance. He literally put him in command of the, the fleet, flagship, Starfleet's flagship, and it's like it was unearned. It was unearned, and I don't know. Pike was too cliche for me, and I didn't really like it.
Well, we'll probably have to differ on that. So I never really thought of Pike as giving him his ship. Like, that was Pike making that decision on his own. So I feel like everybody just made a bad decision in letting Kirk be a captain at his age when he didn't finish school.
Yeah.
Like, that's just destined not to work out. Um,
Yeah.
I liked Pike because I just like seeing like a more mature captain, and one with a sense of humor. Because especially when they're on the Enterprise in 2009, and like they're about to follow everybody to Vulcan. He looks comfortable in the chair, and he's like the whole banter with like Sulu and taking off the inertial
Yeah.
dampeners.
I don't know. I felt like this point was like, I don't know, a joke at Sulu's expense, and it's like, why do you introduce? It was the introduction of Sulu. Why do you introduce Sulu as a bad driver? Like, what's the point?
I took that as not Sulu as a bad driver, is like basically like he's got a 17-year-old at the helm, and he's got like people up there other
Exactly.
than Spock, who has been his first officer. Everybody else is like a cadet.
Exactly.
It's very like I said, the writing here is very questionable. Like rationally, it makes no sense in how that would work in a crisis situation. So, and they
Yeah.
say it's because everybody else is in one of the other systems. I can't remember what the system is called. Like all their forces are actually across like another part of the quadrant, and they can't get there in time, so they're
Mm.
basically going to have a bunch of cadets go up to the starships and answer the distress call. But I'm like, no, no. Some of these kids probably haven't even done their like survival training.
Exactly.
I don't know. I like Bruce Greenwood as an actor. So I've seen him in many other things, and I think for the role that they cast him in and what they gave him to do, he did his best. Probably my take on Pike is, yeah, he's definitely a trope of a character, like the father figure, and the father figure who gets killed. But I
Yeah.
feel like if they had taken him as a mentor to Kirk and like done more with that, it would have done. I think it would have fit well into the material. But they just used him as a
Yeah.
plot device basically. It's really sad because
Yeah.
I know for a fact that like Bruce Greenwood, he's got the acting chops to do what they give him to do. So it's a shame that what they wanted him to do was a death scene. uh, you know. But anyway, it's definitely a personal preference. I think at a
Yeah.
certain point, you like there's some tropes that people like and some that people don't. So
Yeah.
other character,
As you can tell, I'm very bothered by Kirk's character.
yeah,
The last character we should probably talk about is Jayla.
yes,
Um, Jayla is a lot of fun. Basically, she is a good, well-rounded character. She feels real. You can see how she survived for as long as she did. You can tell what her fears are, what she wants to do, what she wants to get. She's a fair character. Like she isn't all fight and she isn't all, I'm in survival mode. This is all I can do. No, she has hopes. She has dreams. She wants to be better. She's just a very good, well-rounded character that I really like.
and sometimes it's hard to do an original character well.
Exactly.
I think we've seen other movies, other like movies that where the original character is kind of flat or doesn't make sense, but the role in which they put Jayla, like it made sense. She was a key figure in the plot, so it was good to have that be someone who was not part of the bridge crew. My favorite scene with her, of course, is where she's it's just the relief on her face when they finally off the planet.
I really like all of her scenes. Like her fight with Coral was also very good. All of her banter with Scotty was so much fun.
Yeah.
I just like
I
her.
don't
Yeah.
know what is a welcome mat. just, just like whatever your stupid friend over here is saying, I'm not I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of the movie, she gets handed an invitation to join Starfleet. We don't know if she intends to do it, but it kind of seems like she does.
Yeah.
So, so a lot of people were kind of like, well, maybe she'll be in another movie. That would be nice.
Yeah. We could also talk about Khan, but I think you basically said everything we have to say already. He was just not very good.
He was not original series Khan. I think that's all there is to say. Like the way that Cumberbatch portrayed
Yeah.
him was so completely different that he was a villain, but he was not Khan as a villain. Um, so I think if I had seen that portrayal, like I said, in another movie, I still would have liked it. But if you try to force me to see that as Khan in an alternate universe, I'm gonna be like, no, no.
Oh, it was just kind of annoying to me that he's like, my name is Khan, and I'm from a different era, and like, do none of these people know history? Like, literally, does none of those people know the history of the world? How did they not immediately Khan, the great, the bloodthirsty dictator that is very well known in our Earth's history? Like, none of them. Like, the fact that it didn't really register with none of them, just like,
It's the writing though. It was meant to be dramatic. It was
yeah,
meant for, and it
yeah.
was also meant to explain to the audience who knows nothing about Star Trek that like this really is like a bad guy.
Yeah, but like, in the original series they did that. They like Khan, and they were like, oh yeah, the guy from our world's history. We know he's a killer. We
Yeah.
know he's very bad. There was a very big war. But in the movie, they're like, Khan sounds interesting.
Well,
Like,
that's because they
how
had
did
to
you not?
have Prime Spock show up and go Khan, Nooney, and Singh.
Yeah,
And Prime, Ambassador Spock was like, I don't want to say anything, but he's a bad guy.
yeah, yeah. He's very good.
The role that Cumberbatch played, like, he's definitely the type of villain that I think he's a psychopath, but sociopath at best. you know? So he seems like he wants to make himself out to be the victim, but he's just bad news. As you can see, Kirk like keeps one eye
Yeah,
on him at all times. So,
yeah.
and with good reason.
Mm.
And then of course, what about that whole scene where he just like when he finally gets to see Marcus and just like squeezes his head like a grape.
Oh yeah.
God. Oh no. Maybe we should talk about Carol Marcus really quick. Like I just, talked about her for like 2 seconds.
Yeah, she barely had anything to do. She is so forgettable. Like, literally, her underwear scene is the most memorable scene because it's so disgusting. She really had nothing to do there.
Well, she did save McCoy. All she did was like rip out the innards to the torpedo.
Yeah.
And annoy Spock by showing up to be the science officer. Like I was kind of like, who even like approved to put her on that ship?
And honestly, it was so weird because the way they put her in there, you're like, oh, she's gonna have this really big role later on, and no, she doesn't.
She's literally in the background until like the three key moments where she shows up.
Yeah.
One is like, oh, I'm actually Dr. Carol Marcus. I know something about these torpedoes. Okay. The point where she
When
tries to get her
her, yeah.
father to stop firing on the ship, and that backfires. And then
Yeah.
there's this weird like end scene where it seems like she might join the crew of the Enterprise, and then you're just like, what?
Yeah. It's just,
It's a shame because it's like, well, Carol Marcus is in, she's like a figure in this
yeah.
in the movie, so we just have to
In
put
the
her in.
horror.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a shame. And it's a waste
Yep.
of a good actress because I like Alice Eve too. That's what's kind of interesting about like these newer movies. I know a lot of these actors that they're like casting. I've seen them in other
Hmm.
things. Like I've seen some of the range that they have. And so when you come in and be like, "Oh, this person's not new to me. I
Hmm.
know what they can do." And then you see them like take on this role where it just turns out to be a dud or like they're wasted, you just go, why? Why? And then it comes down to the writing.
Yeah, I only knew like the really well-known ones, Chris Pine, John Cho, Carl Urban, and Zoe Saldana. But yeah, they were all of them were completely wasted. It's like, yeah,
It's a waste of talent.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you're gonna make a Star Trek movie.
Oh, and Sam
There's
Jackson,
just so many more things there's just so much potential you can do, but why waste it like
yeah.
that? Okay, I think we've covered all the characters really. So let's just we've kind of talked on and off about the things that we liked and didn't like. Um, but I'd like to know, Soda, what is the thing that you liked most from any of the three movies?
Hmm. Well, first of all, I did like the design of aliens they have. Them. They had a lot of creative designs and like even in the first movie, in the first few minutes when it's just like when the Kelvin is attacked, you see this nurse that in at first glance looks like a human, but then she turns around and she has these huge eyes, and it's like that's actually a really cool design, and they have a lot of like those cool designs. Like the one, for example, in Beyond, that hid the part of the weapon in her head, basically. Um, yeah, I really like the alien designs in those movies. I think those are good. Um, Apart from that, I think I mostly talked about Beyond was had a good screenplay, unlike the other two. Yeah, I kind of like the relationship between Uhura and Spock when they got like more of a I guess a light in the second movie. Like this was basically one of the few good parts about Into Darkness.
You mean when they're having like a tiff? they're
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
yeah. Because then you actually get to see the relationship. Like, yeah, they have this.
Kirk was third wheeling. It's like I don't really
Yeah,
want to be a part of this conversation, but I'm stuck here.
yep, basically. And I like I said, I like Simon Pegg as Scotty. I like Carl Urban as McCoy. I think John Cho and Anthony Yelchin did a great job. I like Jayla. Um, yeah, there are all certain parts that I like. Just mostly the writing in the first two and the way they handled Kirk and Spock's character was very very poor. Really cast a shadow on the whole movie. Basically.
So can I tell you a fun fact about Beyond?
Yeah.
If you get a chance to watch some of the behind the scenes, I definitely recommend it. They, in honor of the 50-year anniversary, they did 50 different alien species, new alien
Ooh,
species. So a
nice.
lot of the prosthetics that you see, like in the different looking aliens in Beyond, like there's 50, at least 50 of them. My favorite, of course, is the one at the very end where Chekhov is talking to the female, or that looks like she has a crustacean shell for as part of her head. Like that's really
Yep.
that's the most intricate prosthetic they did for that movie.
Hmm.
And if you watch the behind the scenes, it shows you like how they, went out of their way to like build these, and even how they did like the changing of Carl's face throughout the movie
Hmm.
as he like feeds off of the other life forces, and like how his face shape changes. Um,
Nice.
yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, like fun facts about that movie. So I'm with you. My favorite things about Kelvin Universe, I like Carl Urban's McCoy. I just like I know Carl Urban, but I know how much he liked Leonard McCoy from the original series and how honored he was to do it. And I feel like there was so much potential there. Like, we didn't get to see a whole lot of it, but what we did see was great.
Yeah.
It's like, how much A plus like material can I give you in my 2 lines? So, I really, like you, I liked all the different aliens. I liked, I also liked the ship. The ship is white.
I I have a problem with that. First of all, like we said, the lens flares, so many, but also I felt it was kind of a little bit devoid of personality. You know, I don't like that it was completely white all over the place. It felt apple, too much apple.
Yeah.
I don't want to be. I don't want to fly around in an apple ship. You know.
By contrast, I think it really makes it stand out that it's like another universe. Because, and it's not just like white, but there's like a lot of like holographic technology in there. The stations look different. The captain's chair looks different. Like, even like Spock's station, like way behind him instead of to the side of him. Like, I just thought it all was pretty. I just thought it was different. I like different.
I think they incorporated a lot of this imagery into Discovery, the old holograms and the lights and stuff. Yeah.
I guess my point here is it made it seem like the technology really was futuristic for Star Trek. So, but you're not working on a 1960s budget.
Yeah, but I mean, also, you know, every decade's idea of futuristic is different.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay.
I loved all the little comments like the giant green space head, or you know, displaced by the wormhole.
Yeah.
You know, the whole thing, Crawl, like, and Kirk fighting and getting, like, Kirk gets thrown around so much in every movie. He literally gets his butt handed to him by the enemy every movie. He's like decked out, like been punched in the face and thrown around, and you just go like, wow, how many bones does he break every mission? I didn't like any of the uniforms, like just the subtle changes to the uniforms up until Beyond. I liked the uniforms in Beyond much better than I liked in what you saw in 2009 and Into Darkness. So
yeah. Me too.
Especially in Into Darkness, the material just looked like fake. It was very weird. What I didn't like, the lens flare. God, like there's no good reason. If you want your person to like your movie, you want them to get sucked into the movie. You don't want them to be taken out every time they see like bright lights across their screen. Yeah, so no, that was definitely a no. All the plot holes in the first 2 movies. Why in the world would you maroon somebody on an ice planet where they can get so far away from a station in like ice planet conditions where they get chased by giant monsters? Like what?
The punishment was so disproportional of the crime. Like, he just annoyed you, so you threatened him to die on an ice planet.
I like the mention of, like, you know, Scotty accidentally beams Archer's dog somewhere. Whoops. That's why he got stuck on the ice planet.
Yeah.
Manning basically an empty, like, headquarters. I mean, there's so many things I really didn't like in the first 2 movies, but at the same time, the 2009 is the reason why I went to watch the original series. So, it seems kind of contradictory, but I will tell you, I came back to watch the first, like, all 3 movies before this podcast. I watched the first one and went, wow, this movie is definitely not as good as I used to think it was. That was my impression. I was like, okay, so I guess I have, like, the jaded perspective now. I've seen so much Star Trek. I've seen so many movies from, like, a writer's perspective that, like, when you see plot holes, like, they're, like, glaring to me. They kind of, like, take me out of the movie. Like, leave me with questions. So I liked it less. probably than I had in the past. I hadn't seen it in a few years. Into Darkness, I hadn't seen probably in 3 years at least, 3 or 4 years. So I came back to watch Into Darkness and went, ooh, this is. I mean, it just was so glaringly not a Star Trek movie. I didn't feel one way or the other about it. Like when I finished watching it, doing that rewatch, I was kind of like, well, you could have just like taken off the Star Trek label and changed the name of the characters, and it could have just been a science fiction movie. So it just made me think I don't necessarily get anything of value out of this movie, even for the characters really, because it's kind of like it's unnecessary to kind of regurgitate the Wrath of Khan plot and force them to go through all this other trauma. Like, you don't have to kill Pike. You don't have to have Kirk, sacrifice himself. You don't have to have Carol Marcus in here. She's not doing anything. Like, there's just so much that just seemed off about it. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So my question, Soda, is, would you watch any of the movies again?
I would watch Beyond again at some point. I might watch the first two again to show them to someone and laugh at them. Because they're just bad.
Yep. Do you kind of see now why like Kirk and McCoy is like so popular?
I do, because like we said, Spock was very poorly written.
Mm-hmm.
Sad, but it's true. I have a question for you though. How many times do you think you've watched the first two movies? We watched them since you watched them first time.
How many times have I? Because I've watched Beyond like a dozen.
You said.
I actually have the digital version of Beyond, and it's something I watch every time I would fly across the ocean for a business trip and back. So it was entertainment. Okay, so Star Trek 2009, I have actually only seen it probably 4 times. Because I never watched it in theater. I think I watched it twice in the earlier years when I was, just coming into the fandom. I watched it again and I watched it like 2 other times with a friend. I think I watched it one time with my mom and then one time with a friend. So really like 4. I haven't seen it that much. It had been a long span of time since I watched it this last time, like a couple weeks ago, and it really does stand out to me how not good of a movie it is, just from several points. But at the same time, I'm really glad younger me got something out of it in order to watch the original series. So, because I don't regret getting into Star Trek. Into Darkness, I have probably seen that like 4 or 5 times. But only because my dad loved it so much. He was very simple minded in that, if it's a sci-fi action movie, he likes to watch it. He likes drama and like space fights, and so those hit all the buttons for him. And we watched it at least like 2 times together. 2 or 3 times together. And I hadn't watched it in many years though, since this last rewatch. And like I said, my impression of it now is probably worse than it was the last time I watched it. And it's just that I didn't get a whole lot out of it. I think if you really, really love the characters, you might watch it for just some of the scenes with the characters, but you don't watch it for the plot.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's true. Yeah, I know. I mean, there are a lot of episodes like this where I'm gonna fast forward to the scenes if the characters I like, even if the episode itself isn't very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions for me?
I was just wondering about the revival of the fandom, because these days there are a lot of fanfics about Star Trek that are all about the new movies. Even
Yeah.
some that are labeled as old series fanfics are very obviously written about the new characters. Would you say that the net influence of those new movies on the fandom was good or bad?
It was good. One, because it brought more people into the fandom, and those
That's
people
true.
like me ended up watching the original series and some of the other material and appreciating that. So I think it expanded the fandom, one, which was very good. You need that in order to keep the fandom going. And two, I think the other positive influence was it made people think more about like the potential for alternate universes. Like there was always the Mirrorverse, right? The Mirror
Mhm.
Universe, um, and writing like original series fiction from like a Mirrorverse perspective. And there's
Yeah.
always been like some original alternate universe stories, but not a whole lot in the original series. And now it's like you have this whole branch offshoot of AOS cat or crew meets TOS crew, and like you have people really, really digging into what are the differences between the two universes and where are they the same. So it makes people think more about what they appreciate about the original series and what they like from the Kelvin universe that maybe wasn't necessarily part of the original series. It just there's always a positive side to expanding the playground.
Yeah.
I personally don't think it detracts from how much people love the original series. Um, in fact, I would say, especially for me, I want to think that the Kelvin Universe characters someday are more like their counterparts in the Prime Universe. And
Mhm.
so it's really hard to explain, but I feel like only positive things came out about it. Now, there's been a lot of infighting. I won't deny that. There's
Yeah.
a lot of infighting. Does Spock really belong with Uhura? Like, how do you
Yeah.
reconcile Kirk Spock when they don't like each other for most of the Kelvin universe?
A lot of people just started chipping Kirk with McCoy.
There's been some infighting over which version is better. Like, oh, original series Kirk is always so much better than Kelvin Universe Kirk. And I'm like, they're two different characters.
Yeah, they really
You just kind of have to accept the fact that whatever their origins are, that might have seemed the same, the Kelvin universe completely like changes the course of that character's life,
Yeah.
and then tries to go back and rectify it, but makes a mess of it.
Yeah. I really do give those movies credit for reviving the fandom because they did a lot. But at the same time, I am kind of annoyed when I click on a fanfic that is labeled as an original series fanfic, but the characterization is very much the Kelvin Timer
I
characterization.
don't know why people do that. Like, I think
It's
that's on
really,
the person
yeah,
who is not accurately
yeah,
differentiating. So, and the thing is, some people like start to blur those differences. You really have to pay
yeah,
attention sometimes to like how they're describing the characters to understand like which version it is. And then you have people like
yeah,
me who are gonna blur the distinction between the two so much that you could decide whichever it is and probably be happy with that. I tend to like the stories more that actually like make Kirk really call out the differences in the Kirks and like make the Abramsverse Kirk like they own like all the messiness of his character. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. At the same time, I can say I personally I'm just not interested in stories about Kelvin Timeline Kirk.
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
just he's just not my kind of character. I just don't like this kind of character.
Anything else?
Nothing that I can think about.
We spent quite a long time kind of really breaking down all these movies. I can't
Yeah.
reiterate how happy I am that you were able to watch them, Soda, because it's been so fun to just listen to your perspective, listen to your first impressions of those movies. It takes me back kind of to the days when like Into Darkness aired, and then suddenly you had all these reviews coming out in the next like 2 weeks that were just like scathing. and and yet you were still trying to cling to the fact that you had finally gotten more material after 4 years, but that material was so weak, and like you had to really pick it apart down to the bones to find the pieces that were even like fit into probably the view you now had of the Kelvin universe from 4 years of fandom.
Yeah.
So, because you know, we tend to play up those things we really like and try to like
Yeah.
brush everything else under the rug.
I really don't pity the fans at that point. Like,
Yeah.
it's a very bad position to be in.
I think I will still continue to enjoy the Kelvin Universe fandom. I think I've gotten really used to like the Abramsverse version of Kirk. I would say like there's this whole treatment around his character of, you know, people really like to like pick apart why does he behave so differently, and for me that's enjoyable. It's like, well, you've got him like coming out of massive like trauma when he once he goes into the academy. You know, there's indications that he came from trauma or at least abuse in his childhood. If you ever get a chance to watch any of the deleted scenes, I recommend that because there's some of that in there. You know, people like to think about, well, what would have been like in the Tarzus situation for him when he doesn't have, it's clear he doesn't really have support at home from family. So
Yeah.
there's a lot, it sparks a lot of like good psychological debate. Like, what is it that changes a person, like nature versus nurture? And why is it that Kelvin Universe always tries to come back to like nature, like it's his destiny, when
Yeah.
he's still so different? So makes for a lot of good conversation.
Interesting. I said that even though I didn't enjoy the first two movies, I'm still kind of hoping there would be a fourth movie, and we can see more of the untapped potential that we kind of got to see beyond.
Yeah, it really is nice to get all that potential like that you see in Beyond, but then again, how many years has it been? Another 4 years.
Or, yeah.
So going on 5. So you just,
Yeah.
it's also kind of heartbreaking because you know the actors themselves have like moved on. They've had to move on,
Yeah.
you know, to other things, and some of them are probably at a point where it would take a lot to get them to come back.
You know, maybe we could see a Kelvin versus Next Generation movie. Wouldn't that be something?
That's actually what they were thinking about doing for the fourth movie. It was pretty much like confirmed by I can't remember, Noah Hawkins, whatever his name was, who had the last person to be picked to direct the movie, because you know that director changed several times. He said that they were really thinking about doing a Next Generation version. You know what I would like? this might seem funny to you, but I would love for Strange New Worlds to have a cameo by one of the Kelvin Universe characters. I would love for like Carl Urban to finally get his screen time by popping back into an episode and be like, well, this is not my universe and that's definitely not my Spock. You know, just like DeForest Kelly got to show up in later
Next
on.
Generation.
Yeah. I think that would be great. I'm all for that.
I'm actually now that I'm thinking about it, that would be great. Because he is really, really good as McCoy.
And to think they have that connection to Ambassador Spock, right? To supposedly the version of Spock that comes from the Prime Universe. So if you like send one of them into like an earlier time in the Prime Universe, that could be a very interesting episode.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, I know what you're going to be like when you're older, but I still like my version better. You know, McCoy could trick him into thinking they're like best friends in the future, like really best friends. You know, technically they are, but like hand holding best friends. Then Spock would just be horrified. It would be great. Sorry, my brain goes to strange places.
Well, it is called Strange New World.
Okay.
Well, I think that's a wrap for today.
Yeah, and I just want to thank our audience for listening to Soda and I really just hash out all that is the Kelvin universe. And we always love to hear people's opinions. And so feel
Yeah.
free to share with us. And, thank you again, Soda, for this delightful conversation.
And thank you. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.